Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. It's often not too easy to draw lines between the sacred and the secular. There's a push, kind of ontological egalitarian push, if I can use a couple of big words right together, to obliterate any kind of distinction that's sort of accepted even in amongst the good guys. I think it's important for us to remember that a cheeseburger and fries is holy, that it is something that we should give thanks for, but it's not the same level of holiness as the bread and the wine. That's the kind of thing, that ontological egalitarianism that I think is profoundly unhealthy. But there are practical problems with this as well. I remember when I was running my own ministry, Highlands Ministries, some time ago. I'm doing the same thing now. But then in that context, I needed the work of a graphic designer for website things and for packaging and that kind of stuff. And we were this ministry, and I tried to figure out, well, is this something that should be paid for, in a sense, through donations? This is kind of secular, in one sense, kind of work. That is, if you look through all the various and sundry callings and ministries that we see written in the Bible, graphic designer is not one of them. And when you do graphic design for a ministry, does that change that? Now, I didn't know the answer to that then. I don't know the answer to that now. Thankfully, I don't exactly, maybe I shouldn't say thankfully. I don't have to answer that right now because I'm not in a place where I could hire a graphic designer. I will say this, however. I want you to understand that while podcasts are a kind of media that extends across a broad swath of the world, you can listen to podcasts on virtually any subject whatsoever. We're about the business of trying to help people understand and to embrace and to rejoice in the truth that Jesus changes everything. Now, getting that message out, maybe a graphic designer would help. Maybe a marketing person would help. Maybe a technological person who's got gifts that I don't have would help. All of these things are questions that sort of are beyond my skill set. I'm good at talking into this. Well, maybe I'm not. I like to think I'm reasonably comfortable. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. Reasonably comfortable talking into this microphone. And I do, in fact, believe that God has given me a set of gifts and a training to be able to help people understand the truth that Jesus changes everything. In fact, sometime in the not too distant future, I'm going to be speaking, God willing. It's not all set in stone yet, but speaking at a small event nearby that's looking at questions of eschatology. And there's going to be different men representing different positions, giving the defense of their respective positions, and I'm going to kind of clean up and give the summation. And I thought, oh, that's just great. I'm delighted to do that, because one of the things that I like to remind people is that whatever your eschatological view may be, Jesus wins. Jesus wins all the time. Even in dispensational eschatology, at the end, Jesus wins. And that's what we need to be celebrating. So, again, that's the kind of thing that I want people to understand, that Jesus changes everything. And so that's why we do this. Now, my question for you is, are you glad that we do? Are you in agreement with us that the work that we're doing is valuable and important? That it is a blessing and a help to people as they seek to grow in grace and wisdom, as they seek to make manifest, that is, visible, the glory of the reign of Jesus over all things? And if so, if that's what you believe, then to ask you, would you come alongside us? Would you support this work? It is, again, a medium that crosses a huge swath of reality. But we're focused. This is a podcast, but it is a podcast that's focused not on the everything so much as on the Jesus changing everything. We're here to talk about Jesus and his bringing all things into subjection. So, would you consider supporting us, coming alongside of us? We are always grateful for one-time gifts. We crave monthly donors. It helps us to be able to plan and know what to expect. Either way, if you're interested in giving, you can simply go to the donate page at RC Sproul Jr. There's a button on the front page called Donate. You click that button, it'll take you through. If that's too complicated, you can always send a check to Dunamis Fellowship. And our address is 4425 Denali Cove, Fort Wayne, Indiana, 46845. We would love to hear from you. We would be encouraged to hear from you, and we thank you for the opportunity to speak into your life through the Jesus Changes Everything podcast. Have you ever asked yourself why it is that we all struggle with self-awareness? I'd suggest it's because we don't much like what we would see. You can take your pick of word pictures to describe us. We've got our head in the sand. We've got logs in our eyes. We suppress the truth that we are unrighteous, in unrighteousness. However you put it, we are ugly as sin and don't want to admit it, because we are as ugly as sin. One of the chief strategies that we use to hide ourselves from ourselves is to be on the hunt for flaws in others. When I am busy focusing on the failures of others, I, A, haven't the time to look for or at my own, and B, can see my own as small in comparison, and C, can keep other people's attention on the failures of others, and D, paint myself as a heroic crusader for righteousness. What ends up happening, of course, is that I end up parading my hypocrisy for all the world to see. Consider, if you would, what you've heard so far. I suspect if you are at all like me, you started out listening to this segment of the podcast asking yourself this question. Yes, why do they struggle with self-awareness? You may be wondering why they aren't self-aware like you and I are. You, if you are like me, are wondering, why can't people be gracious and forgiving and humble like we are? We have whole swaths of the church. We are, rather, whole swaths of the church where we grumble about other swaths of the church that just don't get grace like we do. We pat ourselves on the back for not being like those legalists. We go to the temple, beat our breasts, and pray. I thank you, Lord, that I am not like other men. I berate wicked Pharisees. I remind people daily of their failure to be loving and kind. Friends, we are all sinners. That reality, of course, excuses no one's sins. It does, however, remind us to remember ourselves, to include ourselves in our witch hunts and our condemnations. It keeps us from adopting a posture of moral superiority that simply demonstrates our own lack of self-awareness. There but for the grace of God go I. That expression carries with it two different meanings. When we see someone suffering, we may speak these words as a reminder that all that we have and enjoy, we have and enjoy by His grace. It says, only His goodness has kept me from that hardship. It also, however, is a perfectly fitting response to seeing the sins of others. The reason I'm not that Muslim that shot up that grocery store isn't because of a goodness inherent in me. The reason I'm not Jeffrey Dahmer isn't because of my commendable moral efforts. The difference between me and Hitler is found in God's goodness to me, not my goodness for Him. We are always to cry out, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. And when we notice that we are praying this way while others are praying, I thank you, Lord, that I'm not like other men, we need to pray again, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. May we always remember that we don't get grace because we get grace. We get grace because He gives grace to us who don't get it. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.